or the Wisdom of Solomon, is much underrated, I think, not just as a beautiful work in its own right, but one which is capable of application to lives of faith as much here and now as when it was written. And it is, of course, a Hebrew work, a Jewish work written in Greek, and is most likely to have been composed in Alexandria in Egypt, probably during the mid-1st century BC, although there's some discussion about the fact it may even stretch into the 1st century AD. But it's one of the 7 sapiential or wisdom books of the Old Testament, of the Septuagint. The others are Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, Job, and the book of Sirach. And the central theme of the work is wisdom itself, appearing under 2 principal aspects. First, in its relationship to humanity, wisdom is the perfection of the knowledge of the righteous as a gift from God, showing itself in action and the way in which lives are lived. In direct relation to God, wisdom is described as being with God from all eternity. You'll know that in some way John captures that sense at the beginning of his gospel when he talks of the word, because that is also to do with wisdom. But the author's prime literary source in building up this book was the Old Testament, the Septuagint, and in particular the wisdom literature, although he also draws on the book of Isaiah. We should never forget the importance of that book. The writer was also familiar with late Jewish works like the book of Enoch, together with the Greek philosophical literature. It's uncertain whether the book has a single author or comes from a school of writers, although I think there's some evidence of recent scholarship that favors regarding it as a unified work. But in either case, its blend of Greek and Jewish features suggests a learned Hellenistic background. And despite the address to the rulers of the world, the actual audience was probably members of the author's own community, who were tempted to give up their Jewishness in the face of the temptations of Greek culture and the hostile conditions facing Jews in the Greek world of the time. The book opens pairs of righteousness and unrighteousness, and death and immortality. Those who do not follow righteousness will fall into senseless reasoning and will not be open to wisdom. Wisdom is not an inherent human quality, nor one that can be taught, but comes from outside, and only to those who are prepared through righteousness. Lady wisdom then dominates the next section, in which the composer of the work has King Solomon speaking. Lady wisdom has existed from the creation, and God is her source and guide. She is to be loved and desired, and kings seek her. Solomon himself preferred wisdom to wealth, health, and all other things, well, until he fell off the bandwagon. She, in turn, has always come to the aid of the righteous, from Adam to the Exodus. And then the final section of the book takes up the theme of the rescue of the righteous, taking the Exodus as its focus. You, God, have not neglected to help your people at all times and in all places. And so the book is not just one of ultimate hope, but one where vivid and beautiful imagery abounds. And the passage we heard just now seems appropriate on this day when we celebrate the Queen's 70th anniversary of her accession to the throne. The advice to monarchs at the start of the passage places the relationship of ruler and God as one which reminds them that the power exercised by those in control ultimately derives from God, both creator and ruler of all that exists, including human power. Whilst this might seem to turn this into an anthropomorphic vision of God sitting on a throne, rather like the passage we have from Isaiah this morning, I think that ultimately such understanding undervalues what's being said. We, of course, are blessed with a constitutional monarchy, with checks and balances. We elect politicians in the Queen's name, and this we do ultimately because we do not wish to hold individuality of decision-making in every aspect of our lives. Sometimes this means that we will be frustrated or even furious, annoyed, or disgusted with those holding power in the Queen's name, depending on the view we take politically or even morally with those who govern on her behalf. At the same time, our monarch, whilst only possessing power of discussion with those elected, nevertheless has the ability to challenge and charge behind closed doors, using, in the case of Her Majesty, the wisdom of experience, long years, and a strong faith. This, I am sure, she has done many times during her reign. And whilst a proportion of the population would wish for a different form of government, perhaps republican, it seems to this old monarchist at least that we have been served as a nation with, yes, a rather bonkers system of hereditary monarchy for almost an unbroken 1,000-year history. It has proved to be far more stable and less contentious than almost any other similar system of government in the West. I may be biased. What this passage also does, though, importantly, is to lead us to consider the balance of leadership and its relationship to God's ultimate power. And it does that with divine wisdom. When we look at the despotic regimes of, say, the Chinese Communist Party, the basket cases of North Korea and Myanmar, but also with the rising nationalistic powers espoused by the leaders of Russia and India, amongst others, we can see that the inward call to wisdom is vital. It is not just a moral compass, but part of that which enables humanity to bear godly wisdom through true empathy. And I think this is what makes the second part of the reading we heard so powerful. Wisdom, as I've said many times before, in the Old Testament is personified in the most extraordinary and wonderful way. Wisdom is radiant and unfading, and she is easily discerned by those who love her, and is found by those who seek her. One who rises early to seek her will have no difficulty, for she will be found sitting at the gate. To fix one's thoughts on her is perfect understanding, and one who is vigilant on her account will soon be free from care, because she goes about seeking those worthy of her, and she graciously appears to them in their paths and meets them in every thought. It's extraordinary, isn't it? In other words, every aspect of life is the opportunity to reflect on the way in which not just rulers, but you and I can enable divine wisdom to guide us and shape us in our relationship with the world. At the same time, through faith in Jesus Christ, who is the Word, we are exhorted to know that, in the words of Paul to the Colossians, Christ is all. Christ is all and in all. Through him, divine wisdom becomes the inalienable right to us as brothers and sisters in Christ, and it is offered without exception to the whole of humanity by the one who gave himself for each one of us. A little P.S. If you thought that I have spoken about wisdom and power to avoid discussing the relationship between wives and husbands, you'd be quite right.